Hey Pro Nerds, Iggy here. Just wanted to say welcome to Diving Deep. Project Nerd has had the luxury of reaching more than 15,000 people a month with our in-house podcast feed. You guys enjoy new series such as Meeple Skills, I'm Not Famous, and now streaming, and you've always enjoyed our long-running series, The Nerdcast. We thank you for the support. But as we reach more and more people, I felt I wanted to do something more with what we were offering. The entertainment piece is there, at least I think it's there, but where is the education aspect of what we're doing? With that, I bring you Diving Deep. Diving Deep wants to learn more about serious causes, mental health, a specific topic, or even just the people we have on as a guest. Topics won't always be easy, the episodes won't always be very fun, but I promise they'll be deep and informative. I want to say thank you for checking out this new series, especially as we cover such a huge topic here in the first episode. Mary joined us from Justice 61, an organization that helps with child sex trafficking right here in the United States. Again, this isn't fun, entertaining in a sense that you're going to have laughs and everything like that, but it is a piece that we hope you take the time to listen to and learn much more about a thing that's happening right here under our noses. Thank you again, and enjoy this first episode of Diving Deep. Hey, Pro Nerds, it's Iggy here, and I'm back for a brand new podcast. So you guys are probably tuning in, seeing this new little logo that says Diving Deep and everything like that, wondering what's going on. It's brand new. We've been promoting and talking about brand new podcasts coming to the network for a while. You've seen Meeple Skills, now streaming, all that other fun stuff. And not to say that this isn't fun, but now we're going to hit you with a little bit serious of the topic. So Diving Deep is something that we started talking about doing last fall, and it turned into I'm Not Famous, which is actually really fun too. So no offense to Carrie there. I do enjoy podcasting with him. But those conversations are fun and talking about people's careers and what they're doing, where I wanted a podcast to really go into some tough topics, talk some big things and everything like that. So if you're used to throwing this RSS feed on while you're at work or wherever in the background where a lot of people can hear. Again, this is going to be a very different topic, and I'll tell you a little bit more specifically about this episode here. But it's not the Nerdcast. We'll just put it that way. So today in my first episode, I'm actually joined by a very special guest, Mary Vigil. How are you doing today?
I am good. How are you?
I am doing well for sure. And we were talking a little bit before this. So Mary is involved with an organization called Justice 61. And when I put out a kind of a ping to my friends and everything on social media or talking to them and said, I want some heavy topics, a mutual friend reached out and said, I've got a heavy one for you. And we thought, what better way to start the podcast by educating the geeks that are out there about the sex trafficking of minors here in the United States, specifically for Justice 61, specifically headquartered here in Colorado. And the reason I think this is such a big deal is this happens much more than we realize at large events. And a number of our followers, our listeners, and our friends, we many times a year meet up at huge conventions, at convention centers, big organized things going on. And we don't realize what could be happening in the shadows, for lack of a better word. So, Mary, why don't you give us a little bit of a rundown about what Justice 61 is?
Okay. Justice 61 is a 501c3 nonprofit. We started in 2004, and we aid in the rescue and restoration of children caught up in sex trafficking within the United States. So we don't do any international work. However, they don't necessarily have to be a citizen of the United States to have our help and assistance. They just cannot be trafficked outside of the borders of the United States.
Okay, and it's a bigger thing in the United States than I think a lot of people talk about. And we talked about that a little bit, and we're both parents, so I already warned you, and I'll warn the audience that I might get awkward at times, or it's a very uncomfortable topic for me, because there's a lot of things that you don't want to think of happening to your kids. And this one is definitely at the top of those lists as a parent. And it's hard to deal with. And I can't imagine what some of those families go with. I think so many people don't realize it. And I want to say it was maybe 3 or 4 years ago when it got a little bit of attention when I can't remember who or how it was being promoted around a Super Bowl about 3 or 4 years ago, finally being talked about that the Super Bowl is the number one place wherever the Super Bowl is held and weekend for this happening. But here in Colorado too, we have a huge event every year, the stock show, and
Yep.
that is another one that is on a top list across the states, not even just in Colorado, but across the United States, correct?
Correct. And, I can't remember this, if it was 2015 or 2016 to be specific, but the data showed that $50 million of sex trafficking activity flowed through the city of Denver and the state of Colorado in late 2015, early 2016. So $50 million is a cash-based business. Basically, what that in layman terms means is we sold children from our neighborhoods for sex, and people profited $50 million off of that. It's a $96 billion a year industry. It's incredibly horrific to think about children being used as sex toys, children being sold as dates. Oftentimes, these kids have been sold and are purchased on multiple occasions in one day. So one child could be sold for sex on average 4 times an hour for 10 hours a day. So if you do the math, that's 40 people that has sexual activity with one child in a 10-hour period. Obviously, their little bodies are not made, or even adult bodies really aren't made to
No.
have sexual intercourse that many times in one day. So on top of the trauma and abuse that comes from just sexual activity that often in a day, from a physical, mental, and emotional standpoint, you also have to think about the drugs and alcohol and substance abuse that goes into this industry in order to make those children compliant, but also in order for their bodies to do what their bodies do over and over. And it's not like they work 10 hours and go home and have 14 hours of off time. These kids work 10 hours. Somebody comes into the house that they're staying in or wherever they are, throws 10 tacos on the floor and says, here's the shit you get to eat for the next 2 days, make it last. And there's 19 kids in the room. So they're they're malnourished, they're undereducated, we've got some drug history, and then we've got some severe trauma and abuse history that we have to navigate with this population.
Yeah, and we mentioned specifically the Super Bowl and the stock show,
Correct.
but as you said, this is a $96 billion
Yes.
a year. This is every day. This isn't
Correct.
just around special events. This is happening in this country every day, and you're not hearing it talked about on Capitol Hill. You're not hearing it
Correct.
talked about even in the local government meetings and stuff. It's sad. It's disgusting. And what really is another terrible thing about it is you talk about, not even with this, but even adults that are victims of sexual crimes, those people that get put away for doing these things, that do get caught, their time served is usually less than those that abuse drugs or do other
Correct.
things too.
Correct.
And it's something our system has so messed up.
Yep.
And I think is, again, when I think about it, we talk about these big events. I'll be, before this airs, we'll be at Planet Comic-Con in Kansas City, and not to say I don't know any details there, so I don't want to say something is happening that I don't know, obviously, but there's 65 to 70,000 people gathering in a little downtown area of a town. It's very likely that right here in the communities that we're running around
Correct.
into, these things could be happening.
Yep. And I can ask you very simple questions of, is alcohol served at this convention? Are police watching for drug use? Do tempers kind of get flared? Is there a worry about manufacturing counterfeit merchandise? If you can say yes to, and is there more than 10,000 people, 5,000 people, 2,000 people in one area? If you can say yes to 3 out of 5 of those, also think about sex trafficking. And here's how sex trafficking comes into play at a large convention like that. These kids are brought to these places as dates. Our family was gifted generationally season tickets to the Bronco games. So my kid can go to the Bronco game with Nana, Papa, or great grandpa, or dad, or mom, and have a great time. Well, a kid that is 13 can also go to the Bronco game with, quote, grandpa, and be grandpa's date, and then service grandpa's friends in the RV during tailgating.
And nobody would think twice of it because it looks like a kid that's there with their
With
grandparents.
grandpa.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
exactly. It's definitely, and again, Chris Jackson, who runs Planet Comic Con, I use that show specifically. He's a great guy. The show's a great show. So definitely not trying to tie this specifically to the people who run the show. It's just Kansas City downtown. It's almost always the same weekend as the Big 12 basketball tournament. And we're talking about a 6-block radius where you have countless of people there for 5-6 straight days of basketball happening, where you have countless of people there for this convention. This year they aren't coinciding the same weekend, but I can't count the amount of weekends that we get done with the convention and you couldn't even walk down the sidewalks because it's so many people in that area. And you see kids all over the place. You see kids with that, and my kids have gone to conventions with me as well, and you would never look twice to think about it.
And it's in the hotels, it's in the gas stations. So one of the things that Justice 61 does is we want to go into those places like that convention and say, hey, we know these kids are coming in here, whether they're coming into the hotel that's right around the corner, or they're getting a Slurpee from the gas station, or they're waiting in somebody's car. Hey, what happens if they come in and say, hey, I need help? Are you prepared? Do you want to be one of those frontline places that says, I've been trained, I can communicate in a safe way to these kids that say, hey, if you come in here and you say, give me justice, I'll know exactly what to do. I'll know exactly what that means. And whoever is harming you will have to get through me and a fucking brick wall in order to get to you. And so really we know these kids are in the community. We know they're out there. We know they're visiting hotels. We know they're going to stadiums and conventions and gas stations, and they're going to your Starbucks. They're eating at your restaurants for dates. We know they're out there. And now it's time to recognize that they're out there and say, we're going to do something about it, because these are the kids of our country. These are the kids my kids go to school with. These are the kids that if we don't do anything about it, they're their backbone. They're the backbone of society. So think about an incredibly abused and traumatized 2-year-old who has to grow up thinking the only thing he or she is good for is sexual abuse. Well, by the time that kid hits 10, we have a lot of work to do.
Definitely. And not to dismiss these people as well, but you think about that with the people who have experienced assault, rape, or anything just at a once or twice in their life, and how much that impacts them 10 to 20 years later. You're magnifying that hundreds of times, thousands of times over. And you mentioned too the drugs and the alcohol that's given to them at that time to do that. So many people that come out of abuse situations, especially sexual abuse situations, find something to self-medicate, usually for the rest of their life. It can oftentimes lead to hurting them, not just during that time, but for the rest of their lives too.
There's suicide risks, there's self-harming risks. There are people who grow up in healthy homes. There are people who grow up in verbally abusive homes that think that that's healthy. Well, these kids think what's happening to them is normal because this has been their normal. And as odd as it sounds, they love these people because statistically in the United States, over 92% of sex trafficking of minors is filtered through 2 channels: biological family members or the foster care system. Less than 2% are kidnap victims, and less than 1% is runaways.
See, I had that statistic. I had no clue. I would have expected more kidnapping and runaways.
No. And so it's people, and I don't call them people. I have a not appropriate word for them, but it's individuals who have been given the right of guardianship or parenting over a minor in their care, and they can sell these kids. I have 2 young children, and their street value is anywhere between $250,000 to $500,000. That means I can list them today and sell them to somebody who will make that money back in a week.
Yeah, that's
And so,
Crazy. It's just
yeah,
crazy.
it's crazy. And I don't call them parents because that's
No,
not what a parent
no,
does.
not at all.
Not at all. And so not only do you have the horrific abuse that they've suffered, the horrific drug and alcohol and mental, emotional, and physical abuse, you also have the betrayal of family.
Well, I
And
can't think of is just anybody who's had any kind of emotional abuse, even, and
mhm,
how that impacts how you trust those around you for the rest of your life.
correct.
I don't know how you get into a relationship after that and fully trust somebody again. It's got to be very hard.
You know, I think I have the best job in the world. And some of that is because you get a kick ass and you and take names and you really get to pull these kids out of the pit of hell on earth, and in your neighborhood, and then you get to look at them in the face. The youngest kid that we've had the pleasure of working with was 6 months old. And you get to look at that young, sweet, innocent child and you get to go, today is the day that changes everything. The worst is over. Like, you will never have to experience what you've experienced again. And from here on out, it's the good stuff. Yes, it's hard. I mean, there are hard days, and we work through a lot of trauma and a lot of post traumatic stress and a lot of complex PTSD and a lot of anxiety and a lot of depression and a lot of self harming. But then you get to watch these kids figure out that they're smart and figure out, I mean, these kids are wicked smart. I mean, if you sit down and you talk to them, they know shit that I don't know. And part of it is because they've had a skill set not very many people have, which is survival. I go to work and I come home and I live in my comfortable house that's dry and warm and the lights turn on and there's food in the refrigerator. They don't have any of that.
No, it really makes you think. It makes me think of in my day job. I was just talking to my boss for my review last year and sitting there complaining about the cost of living in Denver.
Yeah.
And that's minor. That is
Yeah.
minor. The fact that my kids may be in a split home, but they get to go 50% to a mother that cares about them and then just
Yep.
drive 2 miles down the road to a father that cares about them.
And I bet they have fruit snacks in both homes.
Oh,
I
yeah.
bet they have
Oh,
fruit
well, if I don't
roll-ups,
eat them all,
chips.
if I don't eat
Yeah,
them all, because
exactly.
I
Me too.
love those things too.
Right.
But
That's one of
yeah,
the reasons you become a parent is for the kids' snacks.
right,
You
exactly.
know?
But no, they have the luxuries of, yeah, exactly. Sitting on a couch, or when they come over this week, we'll sit down and watch our favorite shows together and everything like that. It is
Yep.
a completely different world that, like you said, it's right there. It could be next
Uh-huh.
door to it. Why,
Yep.
which makes me have a question. Why do you think, especially right now, it's a great, it is what is happening right now is the start of what I see as a revolution. We are calling out attackers. We are putting people, rich people, people that have power, we are putting them on the spot, making them answer for things. But this is still not being part of it. This is
Correct.
still not being talked about. Why do you think we as a country run so far away from talking about this?
Because it is much easier to write your $20 check and get a picture of a kid across the ocean and feel good that you sent $20 to a kid across into another country and you're taking care of them because you couldn't imagine that shit happening here. And it's almost like people unplug. They go, nope, my house is safe. My kids are safe. I can walk to and from school. It's denial. It's stupidity. If I was to be honest, because we've been doing this for over 15 years, and we have fought tooth and nail for laws to be changed and for people to listen. And I still to this day am baffled when people look at me and go, "Huh, you have enough work in the United States to care for children caught up in sex trafficking. I thought that only happened over there." And it's like, no, let's open our windows. I live in a great neighborhood. We love our neighbors. But as I drive through neighborhoods, I look at all the homes with closed blinds and shut front doors. And how many of your neighbors do you know?
Yeah, I live in a condo complex. So I, I don't even know the amount of, see, I don't even know the
Yeah,
amount of units that are in here, let
correct.
alone the people that are in them.
And socializing is hard and it's vulnerable and it's hard to go out and say, "Hi, my name's Mary. I'm your new neighbor. Nice to meet you." It's hard to let our kids play out in the front yard and meet people, and people move. And, there something has shifted in our country where we will take care of people in other countries before we'll take care of our own. I think that's backwards.
I think you kind of hit it on the one thing. Ignorance is bliss is probably the way to put it, because it's amazing that you mentioned all those things that made me think. We are much more hesitant to let our kids play outside because we're worried about them being kidnapped. We're worried about this. We're worried about that. As we said, we're seeing change finally in the way grown-ups are being able to call out the way they assault, because that is still such a big thing. But yet the ignorance of this, because of how difficult this is it brings me almost to tears, like just even thinking about it. And like I said, I'm the type of person that it's hard for me to watch movies about children being kidnapped and things like that, because I can't even imagine. I don't know what would happen to my world if something happened to one of my kids in this capacity or any capacity. It's as a parent, you never want to think that. And that's, I think another great point you made. These people that are doing this to their own family are not parents, because that's just not something that should even come across their mind.
Yeah, and it's interesting because especially right now in the climate of our country, we kind of see this: if you think differently than me, you're my enemy. And so we've lost the ability to say, hey, I live next to you. Whether you think differently than me or not, I'm a safe place. And I'd like to extend you a safe place. That piece of human dignity has been lost, has been overrun, has been forgotten. It's interesting how many neighborhoods we go into to rescue children, and people go, oh, it was right in my back door. It was literally across the street. It was this, it was that. And we are fortunate enough to live in a neighborhood where we know our neighbors and our kids are friends and they all walk to school together. But that takes vulnerability, and that takes commitment, and that takes the initiative to say, hi, this is what I want to create. Hi, this is the atmosphere I want my kids around. Because if something's happening in my neighborhood, I'll walk through fire to help that kid,
Well, there's a great point there too. And I'm going to also, after this, backtrack to another thing. But when my ex-wife moved into a new neighborhood, and she's 2 blocks away from the school, and it was that my son will walk my daughter to school. And that was it. My first thing was hesitation, not let's figure out the neighborhood. Why don't we make sure they meet some neighbors so they have safe places along the way? Let's talk to her classmates or something. My first thought was just, no, I don't trust it. Instead of doing that, and like you said, it's so much easier just to close that
live
door
in a bubble.
And do that, and right here admitting guilty of it as well. And I think we all do to some extent on some things. But the one thing I really want to go back to is that safe place. You use that word a few times in that statement, and relating that back to, so a huge movement in our comic convention world is the safe place. Because another thing is, we talk about being able to speak up, cosplay, costuming, things like that are oftentimes comic books and all that stuff was a male driven world for so long. So many of the women characters all drawn in a way that a lot of women like to cosplay these characters and get harassed because of it. And people at the convention offer their booths as safe places for this, or the convention has a sign up to say safe for this. You mentioned there are ways for these people to say they can be trained or taught to also be a safe place for this. What is, and maybe it's a lot more than something we can fill in a half hour. So at least the avenues where people can find this out, because again, our audience is going to be this audience that's going to be, I think when this airs, we're planning to air it towards the end of, or in April, we'll be less than 2 months out from Denver. A Pop Culture Con is what it's called now. And we talk about how many people come to the stock show. Denver Pop Culture Con also attracts about 120,000 people downtown. So there's going to be people within a few months that will have the ability to maybe be more alert and maybe have some ideas to help. So I'm rambling now, but I'll let you talk. So how do we get these people aware and train them?
So that is when the convention leadership comes in and says, hey, we're bringing 100,000 people to your city. In order to do that, we've been trained as a place of justice. So they can contact us through our website. There's a short little snippet about how to become a place of justice on our website. But really what it is you acknowledge that human trafficking and sex trafficking of minors is a huge issue in our country. And it is around the events that conventions put on. So it's saying, hey, I acknowledge this could be happening here, and I'm no longer going to be ignorant about it. I'm going to be a part of the team that's going to kick ass and take names and say, I stand for these kids. And so Justice 61 comes in and says, here are all the materials. You litter this place with these posters. You train every booth person to say, hey, if somebody comes in here and says, give me justice, this is what you do. This is what you do not do under any circumstances. This is, the chain. It's customizable to the event. So think of if you walk into a convention center and a teen or a child comes up to a booth sponsor and says, give me justice, that booth sponsor will know who they're supposed to call and what they're supposed to do and where they're supposed to take or keep that kid. Then the convention side has a whole different other realm of training. Who do you call? What do you do? Let's start to build a relationship with these kids so that our job is easier to say, look, there's a whole lot of people out there who will protect you and care for you. Not everyone in the world is out for sex from you or abuse or wants to make a video of you or do naughty things with you. And so if we can rally the community to say, I stand for these kids, that's a powerful thing for these kids to know when they come into our organization, to say there were hundreds and thousands of people who said, I'll fight for this one kid.
I think so. I think that would be a powerful thing to see coming out. I think anybody who comes out of a traumatic situation, when they see the troops rally in a way, it is something that's impacted them. So I think my point here is, I guess the listeners have seen it to their own way. I've seen it growing up in the Midwest, people coming together after terrible storms, things like that. It changes the way the community thinks. And this could be a way to impact that for sure.
And conventions, leadership, the individuals who are putting on these conventions can ask for the hotels to become a place of justice. Hey, we will not allow our attendees, we will not advertise for you, we will not purchase a block of rooms unless you are a place of justice. Hey, you Uber, hey, Lyft, unless you are a place of justice, sorry. So as soon as we start to hit businesses really where it counts, which is the dollar, to say, we're going to advocate for these kids no matter what, and you could lose money if you don't. Then we'll start to see businesses and individuals of high net worth get the message and, stop going to naughty massage parlors because you can't afford it. Because I don't know if the owner of the Patriots was caught in a human trafficking bust. Massage parlors are often another form of sex trafficking. Most of those children in those massage parlors work in terms of, they give happy endings, they do sexual acts, they perform on camera with each other or with a paid individual. And that's how child pornography is made. That's how mainstream pornography is made. And so if we can start to litter the country with businesses that say that shit doesn't happen in my store, not only in my store, but on my block. God forbid I'm going to put on a conference or a convention and get busted for counterfeit drugs and alcohol and sex trafficking.
Yeah. And we'll, especially towards the end, I'll ask you how we can get our listeners more involved and to get others engaged and stuff like that too. But now and not to jump around too much, but specifically when I was, and let me click over here on your website, you do have some FAQs, and this is justice61.org, and the 61 is the number. And of course we'll have the links everywhere this is posted. But I think a valuable one you had, it was your last FAQ, was what is the difference between a sex trafficked child and a child prostitute? Did you want to touch on that a little bit?
Yeah. So not too long ago in our country, child prostitution was a felony. However, according to the laws of our country, the age of consent is 18. So that meant a 13-year-old kid could be selling their body for sex and committing a crime when the purchaser is, let's say, 32 and paying to have sex with a 13-year-old. Oftentimes, when that 13-year-old was arrested, their felony charges outweighed in time, money, and more the charges of the person who bought them. And so it's really important to say, hey, you can't have it both ways. You can't say the age of consent is 18, and you can't say that these kids are willingly selling their body for sex at 13. Does that make sense?
It does completely. And it ties it into what you were just talking about with Robert Kraft and And not to blast him here, but he should be blasted. This is
Yeah.
nothing is going to happen to that man. Nothing is going to happen. The most is he will pay a small fine to the NFL for violating their
Correct.
conduct policy. Nothing else will happen to him.
And what should happen to him is, in my opinion, the things that I can say publicly that should happen to him, because I have a whole nother list
Yes.
of things that I can't say publicly. But, how about he donates 10% of his annual salary to combat human trafficking and sex trafficking of minors in our country? How about his team step up and say, hey, we're going to be a place of justice? How about his football players say, we're going to become reps for organizations that combat human trafficking? If we start to see that, that would make a huge impact to these kids.
Agreed.
But, and I'll be honest, as a Caucasian female, it's easy for me to say this, but this is a white man's problem. This is a wealthy Caucasian male problem. When you can afford to buy a child for sex for $200 for 25 minutes, I do not know of something more grotesque than that. And until we start to have a conversation built around race and ethnicity and morality to say, hey, you don't get to use and abuse these children, no matter how wealthy you are, no matter what race and nationality you are, that's off limits.
Yes. And it's very true. I sit here as a white male in the 30s growing up in country. I have had every opportunity I have never had anything taken away from me because of the way I look, because of my, the way I was, or my family history or anything like that. And again, it's when you add money to it, you
Yep.
even put a whole new dynamic on it. And this is we talk about so many problems with the way the NFL, and I'll call it out. I've quit watching NFL games because it's ridiculous. What they're doing is they're letting these players just get more and more brain damage without fixing that. And then they're turning around, and as long as you can perform on the field, you can do whatever you want. And that again goes with, with Kraft here, is that as long as the Patriots are bringing in money, the NFL's not going to do anything to punish Kraft at a level that would really impact him.
And yet the NFL provides the largest human trafficking, sex trafficking event in our country, which is the Super Bowl. And it's like, hey, it'd be awesome. Donate 10 cents from every ticket sold throughout the NFL. Just 10 cents from every team, every game, every whatever the hell you put on, every race, whatever is affiliated with the NFL, 10 cents of every ticket to combat human trafficking. We wouldn't have a housing shortage for these victims or survivors. We wouldn't have a therapy shortage for these children. We wouldn't have an education problem. We wouldn't have a medical care problem, and not just as a season ticket holder for the NFL. I am a born and bred Colorado native and am a diehard Bronco fan. And I think as a former professional athlete, athleticism is huge, and there is lots of good in that. And we can use that platform to do great things. We have several UFC fighters, professional MMA fighters, professional athletes that say, no more. I know this is a problem, and I'm going to use my platform to help in any way possible to combat this issue. It's really about stepping out there and saying, I acknowledge it, more than just once a year, drawing something on your hand and putting an Instagram photo up and saying, I acknowledge this happens. We need more than that. We need more than walks around the city with duct tape across our mouth. We need more than red X's. We just need more than that. These kids deserve more than that, in my opinion.
It does. It needs so much more attention. As somebody who is aware, and we've talked about there's so many that aren't aware, there's so much you're spitting out that I still had no clue about and that I still have no knowledge about. And like I said, it's something we're not talking about. And you bring up, the NFL is a $10 billion a year industry. Yeah, putting a little bit of that money into focusing on talking about it or donating towards it would be nothing to them. It's a drop in the bucket. And it's exactly right. It's the problem here is that I think it starts with that we as a country have to do what we're doing for so many other problems, what we've done for so much in my lifetime. And I love being able to tell my son, in your lifetime, you didn't see some of these things that I've seen. Like, he doesn't understand when we watched Ellen DeGeneres' stand up on Netflix when she's talking about coming out earlier in her career and how that was just destroying for her. I'm like, you don't understand. When I was your age, people didn't come out because of it. And we've seen
Right.
such progress on so many things when it comes to sex or sexuality and everything like that, but not this, but not
And
this.
one of the things that is important to like leave with is this affects all children of all races, of all nationality, of all faith backgrounds, of all gender identity and sexual identity. It doesn't discriminate. Sex trafficking does not discriminate based on the color of your skin, your sexual preference, where you grew up. We care for just as many Caucasian kids that come from wealthy homes as we do any other children.
Well, the stock show is a great example. This
Yeah.
is not limited to a inner city downtown area. The
No.
stock show is more rural people. It's probably predominantly white, everything like that. And there's money there because these
Yes.
people make a lot of money on these things. And that's a great example of saying this is not that
No.
neighborhood where there's a drive-by shooting every 2 seconds. It could be
No.
in any neighborhood.
It could be in any neighborhood. And, my people ask me all the time, so does your job affect how you raise your kids? Yes, it does. It absolutely does. But my kids aren't prisoners in our home. My kids know that if something is off in their school, they can call me and they can say, hey, my friend needs help. The greatest weapon that we have to combat the sex trafficking of minors is minors.
So that was going to be a next question actually for me is how do we educate our children? Because obviously sitting down with my 8-year-old daughter and talking about this is not an easy thing to talk about.
No.
And so how do we sit down with our children and say, hey, when your friends might say something that, tips to this or what that, how do, we want to bring up this topic. So I want our kids to feel like they can go to a principal or myself or whoever. So as I'm stumbling over my words, even asking you how to talk about it with them. So that's what I'm saying. What do you think are some ways parents can talk to their children to help them better fight this as well?
So I think simplicity and honesty are the two things that children understand most. And it's not really complicated. I sit down and talk to my kids all the time. I was holding it off until my daughter wanted to be a Justice 61 girl for career day. And we had to have a conversation about what that meant in kindergarten and go, hey, I love that you want to help people. And I absolutely want you to be a Justice 61 girl. And what that means is you need to go into your classroom and be the place that if you hear something or if somebody comes to school and they have bruises on their face, if they've worn the same clothes for a week, if they don't have lunch, if they tell you that people are taking pictures of them naked or touching them. I just had a friend who came to me and she called and she said, my daughter, who is in the lower grades of elementary school, got a phone call from a friend and said, hey, my stepdad puts his mouth on my privates. What do I do? I said, well, the first thing you do is you ask your daughter for that child's name and exactly what they said. But our children will talk to children in their classrooms. And our children are growing up in an environment which I think is great to have the sexuality conversation, to say, hey, I am a gay male, I am a lesbian, I am bisexual. Those conversations make these conversations much easier.
Agreed.
Much easier. And it's not as intimidating to them as it is to us. It's far more awkward for us than it is them. And it's real simple. Hit home on, if anyone is being hurt, you can be the safe place where they can say that. If anyone says to you, so and so, touches, takes pictures of, kisses, licks, was inappropriate with my private parts, and females, that includes breasts, vaginas, and buttocks. Males, that includes penis and buttocks, but also breasts as well. So how do you have that conversation? It's very simple. Hey, I love you. I want you to be safe. I want your friends to be safe. This is a safe place for your friends. I want you to be a safe place for your friends. This is how you be a safe place for your friends. There are mean people in this world. And sometimes people's mommy and daddies or their grandpas or their aunts or uncles or teachers or principals or doctors, doesn't matter who it is. Sometimes people are mean to children. And nobody should take pictures of anybody's privates. Nobody should lick, kiss, or touch your privates without your consent. And guess what? You're too young to consent. You don't get to say yes right now. Does that
No.
make sense?
Yes, it makes complete sense. And it seems like a much easier conversation now to have with my child. And it is things I hope to be somebody that's there for my kids in terms of these things. And a great example is we were listening to a song and my daughter goes, it mentions she has a girlfriend now. And I'm like, yes. And so does that mean she's gay? And I'm like, yes. And she goes, okay. And that's
Yeah.
how you treat it like normal. So I don't want to say treat this like normal, but treat that part of the conversation normal, that if your friend opens up to you, that if you tell dad or you tell mom, you don't freak out.
You don't freak out.
Yeah, you see that they need to see us handling it in non-freak out way. So next time they're not afraid to bring it up again.
And you have to be honest and say, hey, this stuff can happen at slumber parties. This stuff can happen at basketball practice. This can happen at the rec center when you're dropped off for kids' night out. Hey, this could happen at your church youth group. Hey, there's nowhere this doesn't happen. So if you can just say to your kid, under no circumstances is anyone allowed to do these things to you or your friends. It is against the law. It is abuse. It is not good. You can call us. But as a parent too, I often say it's an occupational hazard of my job. I know where my kids are spending the night. If I have not been in your house, you have lost your ever-loving mind if you think I'm going to leave my kid in your house alone.
Exactly.
Because I'm going to assume, again, occupational hazard, that you're going to make a naughty video with my kid, and then I'll have to kill you.
Yeah,
and I don't look good in orange. So to prevent that from happening, I'm just going to be like, hi, I'd like to see the house, and we have to have a relationship. Anyone my kids know, I know.
Oh, I understand it completely, for sure.
And if I don't, I'd be happy to say, you can invite them over to our house. And I'm surprised at how many parents let their kids come over to my house and I don't know them.
It's a crazy thing because it's making me think about, we as parents immediately stop and say, you can't play outside unless I can see you out the window.
Correct.
But then they send them to whoever's house because that person has another 8-year-old, so they obviously must be fine, right?
Correct.
Like, it just we don't always make the right decisions as people. I think, and that's one thing we got, is we need the self-awareness. We need to own it. And biggest thing here that I can take away from this, and that I hope our listeners are taking away, is acknowledging it. It's right here. It's right here. And this is huge because, again, we're heading into convention season. Us as Project Nerds about to be at 12 plus shows and stuff. And we'd love to find ways to also help at those shows, whether it be the flyers, and I'll talk to you more about that. But there's these gatherings, and like you said, it's right here, and it makes me feel sick to my stomach. But unless I do anything about it, then I'm just always going to sit here and feel sick to my stomach when it gets brought up, right? So
the other thing I think we need to talk about is the online safety piece. Both my kids play video games. That's fine. I have nothing against video games. Play outside, play video games. Too much of anything is a bad thing. So eat your keto and your McDonald's and we'll all be happy. There's that boundary around, hey, you don't get to play on the internet with somebody that I don't know. And it really is the ability to as a parent say, this is my 4 walls of safety. This is my home. This is my children's 4 walls of safety. I don't care if you're coming in through their iPad, their phone, the TV. If I don't like you, you ain't coming in here. Hands down. Sorry. See you later. They can pretend to have conversations. And then as a parent, I am always the one, and my husband is great at it too, going, who are you playing with? Who were you just talking to on video games? It doesn't mean we drop everything and we watch them like a hawk and they're never allowed to do anything ever again. It's just creating that open dialogue to say, my job is to keep you safe and to love you unconditionally. That's it. Pretty much everything else falls on your shoulders. At some point, you got to learn to do your own laundry. At some point, you got to learn to make your own eggs. At some point, you even learn to wipe your own ass. Like, you graduate to taking care of yourself, but forever, my job is going to be to love you unconditionally and to try to keep you safe. And one of the ways I can try to keep you safe is saying through conversation, hey, I heard you were playing online. basketball or racing or, Minecraft or Fortnite? What does that look like? Because it's really easy to watch these pop-up articles. Oh, kid recruited from playing online with Fortnite into human trafficking. And you go, that's an outlier. There's a reason that kid was drawn into, I'm going to go meet a stranger online. There's other things going on that nobody's talking about. Okay, so what actually was going on to make that child vulnerable enough to believe a stranger online that says, I'm going to meet you at Dairy Queen, I'll buy you a smoothie. If somebody were to invite my kid to Dairy Queen for a smoothie, I'd go, first of all, you go there for ice cream and the pretzel sticks. Secondly, who the hell are you? 11:30 at night. No, thank you. That's the conversation to say, I'm not saying playing outside is bad. I'm not saying video games are bad. I'm saying let's open the conversation and say, I am for you regardless of what you believe and who you love and how good you are in school. I got you. And because I got you, my job is to keep you safe. And so I want my kid to open up about bullying. I want my daughter to open up about how she feels about her body as she gets older. I want my son to open up about who he loves or who he doesn't love. I want them to open up about this too. Who are you playing with online? Who are you going to the convention with? I sent my son with a friend to Elitch's. I know the parents, all's well. But I tell you, I thought for a good 45 seconds about getting an Elitch's ticket and being the crazy mom with the binoculars going, where's my kid? Where's my kid? But at some point you go, I know he'll call. I know we've set up a relationship that he knows what is appropriate, what is not appropriate, what is safe, what is not safe. And more importantly, he knows one phone call, no questions asked. My answer is, I will pick you up.
And I think it's the hardest thing as a parent to acknowledge that if we did what we were supposed to do right, we now have to be able to trust that they're
Correct.
going to do what is right.
Correct. And it happens much sooner than we think.
Oh, yeah.
Because it doesn't happen at 18. If it's happening at 18, you are long past your goal. Like if they're just reaching independence at 18, oh, bless them. You really want to see these things of, I can do my own laundry. I can take care of myself. I can situational awareness to our children of, I'm lost. I was supposed to go to 7-Eleven and come back. I don't know what to do, who to call, where to go. Our kids have to learn that so that they're not susceptible to, hey, come to meet me at Dairy Queen at 11 o'clock at night and I'll make all your dreams come true. No.
For sure. Well, I appreciate that is a lot of great advice too there. Before we do end up running out of time, though, I also want to talk about Justice 61 specifically. So I want to talk about the organization and everything too. So it looks like the organization specifically helps with, is aftermath maybe the right term there or something?
Yes. So we aid in the rescue and restoration of children caught up in sex trafficking in the United States. So that's a real fancy way of saying after the doors kicked in and all hell breaks loose and these children are ripped away from the only thing they've ever known as normal, whether that's family, friends, or social services, or the tree in the park, because that's where they're living, they come to us. And so that's a very vulnerable place for them to be. And one of the things that's very hard to admit is over the last, as the CEO of the organization, over the last 15 years, we've only been able to offer outpatient services. So one of the greatest needs that this population has is housing, because these kids are ripped out of their mom and dad's house, their grandma and grandpa's house, their whatever family member's house that they're living in, they're ripped out of that. They're put in foster care. Then a bust happens in foster care. They're ripped out of that. Where do they go? And one of the foundational things that they need is that 4 walls of safety. Come hell or high water, nobody's going to kick in this door and abuse you, because they're going to have to get through us and the 10 people behind us and the 400 people behind them. So one of the things that we provide on an outpatient basis that we've done for 15 years is education, behavioral health and mental health services, medical services, legal services. We have to navigate some criminal records, some past history, some of that. And then what we call life skills, which is we got to teach these kids to drive. We got to teach them to fish. We got to teach them, all the fun stuff, how to shoot a potato gun, how to, all those things that kids get to learn, ride bikes and dig holes and get dirty. And so teach music. And so we're in the process right now of building our first inpatient facility, which will be called Rebel Oak. And so one of the things that is really cool, well, I think it's cool. Other people might not, but I don't really care. But one of the things that's cool is Rebel Oaks will function very similar to houses. So instead of an institution like a mental health facility, it will actually be individual single family homes. So think of if you drive by a farm and there's 3 different farms, there's a house and a barn and a house and a barn and a house and a barn, or, there is a neighborhood with lots of acreage. We're going to create a home-like environment for these kids. So the very first thing that they learn when they come into Rebel Oaks is these 4 walls is your safe place.
Sounds fantastic, actually.
Mm-hmm.
Are you, I know there's obviously a lot of security things in this. Is this first place, are you allowed to say where it's like in terms of state, at least? Is it going to be here in Colorado?
It will be in Colorado. And one of the coolest parts is because we have a kick-ass team, man, we're filled with a whole bunch of nerds. And one of the things that I love about our nerdy little team is if there's a problem, it's like, let's find the person who is the smartest, nerdiest person who can fix this problem. Does that make sense? Like I want the best person, the smart, like you had better be smarter than me, which doesn't take a lot, but, and let's fix this problem. So with the building of Rebel Oaks, number 1, we have figured out a sustainability plan. So on average, we will have a steady stream of federal income through a state-funded school and the assistance of Medicaid for these kids, that after they are cared for, after those bills are paid, you have a little bit left over. And as a nonprofit, you can use that profit to go back into the organization. The goal is we build 1 Rebel Oaks, and then we put Rebel Oaks in every state in our country, because we will have to be able to transfer these kids from one state to another without losing their paperwork, without them having to say what happened to them over and over and over again. We transfer kids all the time for good things, for bad things, for security, for, hey, I'm going to college, for I want to be reunited with an extended family member that's safe, so let's do that. And so we have a lot of work ahead of us, but the first one will be in Colorado. And the reason is because Colorado has one of the most significant issues with sex trafficking minor children.
Well, that part's not good to know, but it's good to know that there is a plan in place to hopefully combat strongly against it. And you were mentioning too of the money coming in, of course, over at justice61.org. It looks like you can buy clothing. You can just donate money even without getting anything. But there are a lot of ways that you can, for lack of a better term, put your money where your mouth is if you're going to start speaking up on it and everything like that. As we wrap up things here, what is probably the single biggest takeaway you would say is needed for our audience? If they only get one thing out of this, which I don't think they will, but what would be the biggest thing that you say they should walk away with?
I would say that, remember, this whole thing started with one kid. She was 13. She was selling her body for sex out of a McDonald's drive-through on Colfax. And it was a chance encounter that changed my life. And that kid is now doing her residency as a physician. And so we might think these kids are gone and that there's no hope, but these kids become nurses and doctors and moms and dads and teachers and police officers and receptionists and executive assistants and engineers and graphic design artists. And musicians, there's nothing that these kids can't do given the tools and the time to recover from what has happened to them.
It's fantastic. And as you said at the beginning, this is our future. This is the future of our country right here. And it sounds like that first step, I guess, with this was amazing. Mary, I appreciate it greatly. It's been incredibly, I've learned so much here. And I definitely want Project Nerd to be a place of justice at conventions. So we'll definitely talk offline about that.
Okay.
But anywhere else, justice61.org, is there any other places or any other avenues, listeners, other brands, things can find ways to help or give or learn more?
We're willing to talk to anyone who's interested in having a conversation. So they can contact us through our Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, or website. And somebody from our team will sit down and have a conversation and really say, what are you passionate about and how can you help? Because there's lots of ways, there's lots of avenues. Number one thing we need that these kids need and deserve is money, because it's expensive. It costs about $1,000 a day to heal just one kid. And it's 120 days before we start to see any sign of life after what they've gone through. So we're in it for the long haul, and it is worth every dime and every penny.
Perfect. Well, I hope, as I'm sure you do, for that day where this is not a $96 billion
Yep.
industry, but your industry is a
Yep.
$96 billion industry.
Mhm.
Again, justice61.org, growing. It's here, Colorado, but of course it's all across the country. Rebel Oaks is the places we want to get into each state. Mary, this was a very, very deep first episode of Diving Deep. I appreciate it greatly, and I hope that many people can take something away from this, and that as we head into convention season here, that people can find ways to be more aware and keep their eyes open. So again, thank you for joining us. I can't say thank you enough here,
Yeah.
but justice61.org is where you can find more information. Other than that, this is Iggy for Project Nerds signing out for our first episode of Diving Deep.